13 Central Office. Nope, this is just my urban sprawl. I feel like I also like it. Set up shop. Not necessarily. So we've got good representation from previous partners, our folks. Like people on so far, and we'll probably get a few more trickling in. We've got a nice crew here in Central Office.
Run the camera too?
I am running the camera. It's sort of on a trial basis, but since we have so many people here talking, might be kind of nice to see. So everybody, yes, the camera is on. Oh. Let's go around real quickly in Central Office so you all can see who
my makeup
is
on.
We'll start with you, Brock.
That's just you. Brock Woods, Wetland Invasive Plants.
Zach Crone, Wetland Invasive Plants.
Michelle Nault, Lakes and Reservoir Ecologist.
Ashley McCord, AIS Research.
Tim Campbell, UW Extension Outreach.
Carol Shaw, Lakes and Rivers Section Chief.
Judy Shear, AIS Outreach and AIS Monitoring.
Kyle Mosel, AIS Response Coordinator.
Alex Delvoy, Surface Water Grants.
Allison McCulloch, Lakes and Rivers Team Leader.
Maureen Ferry, AIS Monitoring.
Fantastic. Thanks. Okay, let's get started.
I'd say for the most part on the participant list, everyone pretty much used their name so we can get a sense of who's in the room. There's a couple of ones that are a little weird. There's one that's KROMRM, Chrome Room, but it helps just to see who's actually in the room. We're up to 28 participants.
Duggan.
So we're using Zoom.
We are using Zoom. Yep. And we even have our video up. Okay, so I'm minimizing participants list. We have an exciting agenda planned for you all today. There are hard copies around the room for those of you if you are curious about the order in which we're doing registration. Most of the material that we're going to cover, the presentation section of the call today, is going to be on DNR work planning exercise. So what we'd like to do today is kind of give you a retrospective of the past 2 years. So I have a bunch of staff around the table here and some folks online who are going to share some of the major accomplishments in the last biennium. And that's really designed so that we can kind of take a little bit of time to reflect on what we've done, but the idea is to then kind of prime our brains to start thinking for the future. So this is kind of one step out of 3 in our work planning exercise. This retrospective is to kind of take a bit of time to reflect back. And then I'm actually going to be sending out a survey link. You'll hear about it later in the presentation. I'll share the link with you. But that is designed to collect feedback and comments on the DNR's work plan from the past couple of years. So there'll be an opportunity to choose what your top priorities are for the work that we're going to be doing. And then also to kind of think about some of the performance measures that we have in our work plan, if those should be retained, expanded, modified in some other way, or deleted. So we're going to present to you what we've done. We're going to send out a survey to get your comments and feedback, and then we're going to report on those results in an in-person work planning meeting in a few weeks. And the idea there is to kind of think about what we've done, take the feedback, and generate new ideas for the next couple of years. Hopefully a work plan will emerge from that actual meeting, and then on the March call, we'll get back together and we'll talk about where we're going forward. Shouldn't take as long as it's going to take today to get through the retrospective. It'll be sort of more of a future-leaning talk. So that's kind of the idea. But this is the Lakes and Rivers Partnership Monthly Call, so we should start with our little rundown of announcements, staffing update, calendar, and then we'll get into the work planning presentation. So I'm going to open up our calendar. It's already open. And per usual, check out what we've got coming up and suggest additions if you have them.
Conference season.
It is conference season. Conference February and March.
There's Illinois Lake Management Conference in Crystal Lake, Illinois on March 14th through 16th. Illinois Lake Management Conference.
pretty small.
Are you going?
I am going to go to that one. Yeah, they asked me to come talk about the value of aquatic plants. It
Woohoo!
looked like there was a lot of herbicide talk, so it should be interesting.
Paul, they'll love you.
Yeah.
Maybe you should take some of those Peek Beneath the Waves brochures with you.
Yeah.
I can order some sent up to you if you want.
Sounds great.
Just send me an email to remind me and tell me how many.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're looking for material too, I have a bunch of like ecosystem services slides and stuff from Teaching Limnology. You've probably got a lot of that material already, but
I'd love to look at them.
okay.
Yeah.
Can you scroll down and see if those Southern Kemp dates are?
Probably not. I have not kept up with this.
Yeah, so that tentative Southern Wisconsin is now confirmed, and that's going to be at Green Lake. Take tentative off.
Great.
And the Kemp trainings there, those are correct. The 25th through 27th, we're piloting a 1.5 day format this year. So it will be from either the morning of the 25th until lunch on the 26th, or the morning of the 26th through lunch on the 27th. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes this year with that.
When does registration open for these?
Yeah, usually we shoot for April sometime, so it'll be sometime in April. I'm not sure if it'll be before or after convention.
Okay. There are no other additions. We'll continue on. If anybody has any that comes to mind later, just send an email. The March call. We have a water quality statewide meeting that is going to take a bunch of our staff out of the office. So we will reschedule that call most likely for the following week, but just stay tuned to your emails, the Lake Partnership list. The announcements for the restarted scheduling will come through there. And then have some staffing updates. First of all, the announcement of our new secretary came recently. So a lot of us here actually, probably in the field too, I think there was a road show. We got to meet him about a week or two ago. It's a lovely interaction I had personally. Yes, some really great questions. So great there. And then we also got a couple of announcements on the department leadership team. So we've got Todd Gaines, Eric Eversberger, and Ben Pelt. So some internal leadership announcements. Any other staffing changes that anyone is aware of? Otherwise, we can talk hiring. You only have a few days on this one. Oops, sorry. But Dane County is looking for a Land and Water Resources Watershed Program Coordinator. It's a pretty neat looking job and announcement. We can send out links with the meeting minutes. And then Green Bay Watershed Manager position is open. We're hiring an aquatic plant management team leader stationed at a central office. It's a Scott Provost vacancy.
Closes Sunday.
Oh, Sunday. So quick turnaround on that one too. Check it out. Get your apps in. Matt Raywald position, the WDNR database coordinator in water quality, working with Tim, is open, I believe still. And we're also looking for a natural resources grants section chief for a position in community finance. Pat Kersup's vacancy. And then there are several positions that are either important to our program or in DNR or our partners. Full-time volunteer management systems specialist, Tom Bernthal's vacancy, and the section chief of the Bureau of Fisheries Management is in progress. Seems like we've got maybe an upcoming Fitchburg Sorgi vacancy. Hopefully this is all up to date. Checked the job site recently. So. Any other hiring announcements? Okay, great. With that, let's get into the work planning. This is an art installation that I saw at Olbert Gardens exhibit. It's kind of a collaboration between landscapers and lighting designers. I thought this was particularly appropriate because we are reflecting back in the last 2 years. This is actually one piece of material, but pretty great. So let's do that. We're going to talk about the retrospective, like I kind of laid out at the beginning of the call. Then you'll be able to submit some feedback on what we present today. I'm going to send you a survey link in the email. And then we're going to have a work planning meeting, TBD on the location, in middle of February. In March, you'll be able to tune in and see the results from that in-person exercise. The survey that we've created to collect your feedback, comments, and responses to this information and what you think we should prioritize going forward can be found here, surveymonkey.com/r, not Reddit, DNR work plan. We will send this link out with the email. So with that, let's get into our accomplishments from the 17th. We're going to go through goals, highlight some of the performance measures, and maybe obliquely talk about the objectives in the last few years. So we'll give a quick introduction. We'll get into the bulk of the presentation. And yeah, without delay. Department vision, just kind of go over some big picture positioning statements that help define and direct the work that we do at DNR. As a department, we excel at protecting and managing natural resources while supporting the economy and well-being of our citizenry. Our Division of Environmental Management, where the Lakes and Rivers program is located, has a statement of purpose, and that is to protect the environment and public health through efficient, effective, and consistent processes that yield measurable environmental results, promote superior performance, and build customer-driven solutions. Our division has a set of goals dealing with conservation, protection of waters, the public trust doctrine, protecting the environment. This shouldn't be a bullet. I apologize. It's awkward formatting. Economic vitality. So these division goals you can kind of see are a product of that larger visioning statement for the department. And then within our Lakes and Rivers section, we have 4 main program areas. We manage aquatic invasive species. We administer an aquatic plant management program. We administer surface water grants, and we support and enhance partnerships for protection and restoration of surface waters. So we'll just dive into our retrospective. We're going to start with our first program area, aquatic invasive species. So I have all of the slides that everyone submitted in this presentation. I'll run the clicker. If I'm behind on the advancement, just say next slide. So first of all, we have 3 main goals within the aquatic invasive species program area. We are concerned with AIS prevention and maintaining a prevention network. We think a lot about monitoring aquatic invasive species, both detecting new populations, response monitoring, and then thinking about new pathways in the future to better understand the way that aquatic invasive species move around the environment. And then we control AIS populations. So that will start with our first goal of developing and maintaining an AIS prevention network. So this is Erin McFarland. Sorry, it's kind of a weird.
Yeah, morning everyone. Is it working okay, Allie?
Yeah, it's we've got kind of a weird aspect ratio going here, but can everybody on the call see it's kind of larger than it should be. I think we're going to be all right. Why don't you go ahead?
All right, we'll go with it. Morning everyone. Thanks, Allie, for advancing slides for me. I I designed my slides around the specific objectives that are in the contract. But if folks have other questions for me, I'll be happy to entertain those later when Allie says we have time. So one of the first objectives that we have under the AIS Prevention Network watercraft inspection goal is regarding trainings, training materials, and online resources. So things have really changed since I started doing the Clean Boats, Clean Waters educator position in 2007. We have a lot of county-based and regionally based AIS staff and coordinators, as most of you guys know. So many of them are conducting the trainings and workshops, and I'm actually conducting fewer trainings and workshops and doing more, providing them with resources. So based on what the folks on the ground shared with me and then the trainings that I conducted myself, we hit about 22 workshops. I honestly think that's probably an underestimation. I think some people just forget to let me know what they're up to. But just so you know, that's about what we were at. So I suspect it's between 20 and 30. Since 2009, we've conducted Train the Trainer sessions. These are designed for staff and other individuals who are conducting Clean Boats, Clean Waters trainings themselves for different lake groups. And so in 2018, we conducted 2 of those sessions, one northern, one southern, and Paul and I pair up to provide Clean Boats, Clean Waters and aquatic invasive species monitoring training at those sessions. So we had 2 of those. And then we also, I conduct in May a training that's a little more geared towards interns and staff, either hired by the Department of Natural Resources, the counties, or other things to provide them some specialized training, the sea grant interns. So that's what kind of went on this year. We do try to offer more online resources since it is one of the goals in the work plan. Sometimes I feel like some of our inspectors aren't so much looking online for the resources, but we do try to offer everything up there because I think it's getting more and more that direction, even though some of our inspectors are from an older generation. So we do have our inspection videos online. They provide some examples for folks about what an inspection might look like depending on the type of boater or the previous things the boater or angler has been up to.
Right. I think my voice is carrying through, so I'm going to stop talking.
Hi, Susan. And we also have the Clean Boats, Clean Waters manual online, forms, and some PowerPoint resources. It's interesting. I did just put out a couple weeks ago a survey to our watercraft inspectors asking them like what kinds of resources do they like, and they still prefer to have a lot of paper resources. So I do think we're going to still try to improve the things online and push people that way, but we're probably going to keep having a hands-on book for them and other pamphlets and things. Briefly, real quick, we'll start with this slide in just a second. Allie, the last thing I was going to say is that we have an online ordering system that's hopefully going to be up and Atom as soon as we've confirmed that convention registration is operating great. Maud LaMarche in our office has been a great help to me. People are going to start ordering their Clean Boats, Clean Waters resources online, and so that'll be very exciting to have that an even better system set up for them. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So here's some of the data that we have. Some of the other objectives 2 and 3 are summarizing our program effectiveness, continuing our boater behavior study, and implementing mobile paperless entry. So our 2018 data is right up there. You can see that online. And I just did a quick graph to sort of compare the last 3 years for you all. We are doing pretty well holding steady with our inspection numbers, but it'll be interesting to see how much we're able to retain those higher numbers. So it'll be a good discussion, I think, at our February meeting about some other ways we could set some goals numerically or other ways so we can graph out our success for the watercraft inspection program. Allie, can you click it one more time to see if that next graph? Yeah, perfect. The other aspect of our data that gets collected is called our boater behavior study. So our inspectors who are on the ground talking with people and sharing our prevention efforts really focus on sharing prevention steps, letting boaters know what they can do. So we have a secondary study called the boater behavior study that focuses more on asking folks what they did last time they left the boat landing. And so that's the data that you see up in that little table there. This study started in 2014, so we have 14, 15, 16, and 18 data for it. And Tim's been really integral in helping design this study too. And we've been thinking about what different ways to analyze the data, but so far we just have some percentages. We still see the trend of more people knowing to inspect and remove. So we'll continue to collect that data just so we keep our baseline and think more about how we can look at it differently. And then the last thing to share is the Clean Boats, Clean Waters mobile app. It's considered an Android version. And really, Tim has done the load of work on this project. He's helped work with the Department of Information Technology, I think, the DoIT at Madison, and been the in-between person between them and the DNR with Jake and Dennis and the SWIMS folks. So it's been around for a few years. It just takes a lot of time, especially since SWIMS 2.0 is being kind of coming out. It takes time to see changes in the mobile app reflected in SWIMS and vice versa. So where we're at now, we're hoping that we'll continue to partner test it this summer. We're in, I believe, phase 2. So we're very, very close to having an app that will upload the data an inspector puts in it directly to SWIMS, but not quite yet. So we're almost there. I don't know if Tim wants to provide any better information. If I skipped something, Tim, feel free. But if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer later.
No time. We're gonna go on. Thank you very much, Erin. That's a great summary.
Maybe hold your questions, record your thoughts. You might have time at the end to try and hit the big ones, but we are interested in the feedback, just can't do it now.
All right. So, Tim.
Okay. Apologies for the worst 2 slides ever.
By the communication.
Yep. When you're limited to 2 slides and 5 minutes, I'm using 30 seconds of it apologizing. So for developing and maintaining the prevention network, we have a number of different objectives that we've been working under. I think kind of the bread and butter of what we do is plan and facilitate 2 AIS partner meetings and lead the 3 AIS webinars. So these are just our forums where our AIS partners across the state can get together, network, share information, and learn about new programs. And so for the past 2 years, we've had our 2 spring AIS and SISMA meetings. We had, I think 2017 was in Green Bay, 2018 was in Beaver Creek. And then our 2 fall meetings we've had in Stevens Point. Those are usually 2-day meetings where we're able to dive into topics in a little bit more detail. And then we've also had our Wisconsin Lakes Partnership AIS webinars and then other webinars just to support our programs as we need them, like the Landing Blitz, Waterfowl Outreach, Drain Campaign, those sorts of things. We still have interest in trying to have some other webinars as well on specific AIS topics, but we're just going to try to do those as we're available to plan them and we have interest in them. For managing the AIS listserv, we have about 200 subscribers every year. That kind of varies, maybe plus or minus 10. I looked at the numbers. We average 26 messages a month over this list, so I think we're doing pretty well at communicating over that. And then I also added some information on our Wisconsin AIS Partnership Box account. So not everyone in the AIS Partnership is part of the DNR, so not everyone has access to Central Drive and the file sharing services we have at the DNR. So we use this to share files across our partnership, and we have 89 collaborators and more than 5,000 files available. So that's my plug for if you're looking for something, it's probably on the box. And there's a lot of stuff there, so I'd be happy to help you find it. Objective 3 is just generally supporting the DNR and messaging and supporting the rollout of a few new programs. And so for the prevention network, we've had discussion and feedback at partner meetings, and I've been working with Allie and the different work groups on different funding models and trying to present those to partners and allowing for discussion on them. And then with Sea Grant, we actually have a pilot project for the prevention network in southeast Wisconsin covering Kenosha, Racine, Milwaukee, and Ozaukee counties. We've helped with the APM strategic analysis, public comment period, and rolling that out. We've also participated on the teams for the code development. Objective 4, developing the AIS research briefs for the funded projects. I'm just going to admit to that I have dropped the ball on that one, which is not great, but always
you have an opportunity to redeem yourself.
Yes, I have the opportunity to redeem myself, and luckily we've added Ashley, who I think can help move this forward, and I think this will be a higher priority for us moving forward.
Super.
And sorry, I think I have 1 minute and 90 seconds. So for the current, so for the next slide.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
So for current work, we've just been working on different invasion pathways, trying to outline the risk of these invasion pathways. Are people moving things around within them? Some of these we have more advanced outreach programs for than others, like the wading anglers and waterfowl hunters. We're actually providing people tools to prevent the spread. The Buddhist life release pathway, we got additional outside funding to look at. We have organisms and trade pathways we're looking at. And that the nearly approved AIS management plan outlines the actions that we can use to further evaluate these pathways, which I think we'll see more of in our future work plan. And I'd like to also plug our pathways monitoring effort, which is really Bob's vision over the past couple of years through our GLRI programs and shifting more towards a pathway focus to help address AIS in the state. And I'd like to mention Maureen and the field staff. They're really taking the lead on adopting this approach and monitoring for AIS and really looking for AIS kind of based on all of our different pathways. But there's also a social aspect and whether the water users are what their beliefs and knowledge is of invasive species and what behaviors they're taking, and we'll be working on that more the next 2 years.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Bob Wakeman. Is Bob on?
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great, good morning. Well, as we continue to move toward our network, we are focusing in on giving this a try. As you know, we've been relying an awful lot on AIS grants to accomplish a lot of things around the state. We know that we've had a lot of successes. We've had some problems maintaining a consistent program across the state because of the come and goes of the grants. So we've kind of identified a need to change that. We would like to have a consistent program that delivers a core set of AIS programs across the state, or core services as we've kind of described them. And so we're looking to develop more of a contract program rather than a grant program. And with that, we've been seeking input from our stakeholders around the state to see what they think of that. And some people love it, some people aren't too keen on it, and there's probably some people that are still keeping their powder dry to find out more about it. We've decided to give this a try in a couple of pilot projects. So we've entered into a contract with the Beaver Creek Reserve folks to have them work in their area up around Eau Claire to deliver things like a Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, Citizen Lake Monitoring, Project Red, Purple Loosestrife, all those core flagship programs the AIS program is kind of known for. So Beaver Creek was our first pilot project. We're also in discussions with Dane County and the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance to see if they are interested in being a pilot project to see how this contract mechanism will work. I'm sure there'll be mistakes. I'm sure we'll learn a lot. And that's exactly what the pilot projects are for, is to see how this works. Meanwhile, all this is going on. We're busy drafting code language. I know Allie and Carol and others are busy to get the new code language up and running that supports this network. So that is currently being done. And there's going to be lots of opportunities for future input from our network supporters as the code language go through a public review process. And so we're looking for input when we have our AIS coordinator meetings or stakeholder meetings. We've discussed this contract network framework with that audience and have sought their input. We've gotten a lot, which has been great. So we'll take all that input, work to finalize the code language, hopefully get it approved, and then speedily move into and away from the old grant program and toward a new contract-based AIS prevention network. And with that, I think I'm done.
Thanks. Okay, so moving on to goal 2, monitoring is an important part of prevention. So Maureen, you want to tell us about monitoring?
Sure do.
Program.
Yeah. So I left out and I got 3 slides. My first slide goes over our 5 performance measures within the AIS monitoring program. The first performance measure is to manage early detection monitoring network and monitor up to 1,000 sites annually. Some things we've been working on are integrating with routine water quality sampling on lakes, streams, and wetlands in the Citizen program. So that includes Citizen Lake Monitoring Network, Project Red, Water Action Volunteers, and the AIS Snapshot Day. And then we've been targeting our early detection monitoring at pathways. We've heavily monitored the recreational boater and roadside monitoring, but we've began discussions to talk about like these other pathways for monitoring, which includes the maritime commerce, canals, dams, and diversions, recreational activities and service providers, non-recreational fishing and aquaculture, organisms and trade, the roadside maintenance transportation corridors, and state and federal agencies. This next field season, we'll be targeting the ones that we're ready to target, that we have protocols for, that we understand where on the landscape we look for these things. Then our second performance measure is to monitor prohibited and important restricted invasive species. So those are our like NR40 prohibited species, the ones that like we don't have a lot of in the state. And we've developed local needs processes for department staff to apply for funding to be able to send people out to look for things once we know that there's something on the landscape. And our guidance for response monitoring includes doing the point intercept survey following detection, a full early detection survey, and then doing full early detection surveys within 15 miles proximity, and then using these different, what we know about the pathways, where else they might occur. And we're working to improve guidance for this response monitoring for how far should we look. And then developing teams looking at the genetic information. So we know we've been doing a lot of research looking at hybrid water milfoil. There's other genetic species we can look at to confirm genetic ID for species. And then using the environmental DNA. We can't do it for everything, but there's some species that we've gotten pretty good at looking at them by sampling their water. And then there's the treatment evaluation, which is mainly under the APM program, but that's doing the PI surveys and herbicide concentration involved with management. For performance measure 3, it's monitor aquatic invasive species in national assessments and assess long-term trends. So we've integrated with like the National Lakes Assessment in 2017 and National Rivers and Streams Assessment in 2018. We'll do rivers next year and then wetlands after that. It goes around cycling. So instead of doing that 5-year study we did, sampling 200 lakes each year for all the staff, we're using these national assessments to look at the rate of spread over time. And then we're also looking at long-term trend for certain aquatic invasive species, and that's going to include Eurasian water milfoil, starry stonewort, zebra mussel, spiny water flea, New Zealand mud snails, and then other species are being discussed too. For performance measure 4, train AIS protocols, increase number of volunteers. We host regional trainings each spring with the regional staff and the regional offices. That's done by our AIS staff. We have also a statewide train the trainer training where we work with just our regional AIS coordinators. And we go over identification, reporting, verification, data management, disinfection. And this next field season, we're going to be working more broadly with other programs within the DNR and then our partners and citizens. For performance measure 5, track and monitor wetland invasive plants. It's pretty similar to performance number 1, but it's been in the developmental stage. It's to develop a protocol for monitoring for invasive species in wetlands. We've developed it, we tested it, and we integrated it into the routine water quality monitoring and wetland monitoring. And then we're also integrating the wetland monitoring into the pathway monitoring. So the next slide. On the left, I show what our targets for fieldwork events, and on the right is just a summary of what we've found over the years. So under fieldwork events, I go by performance measure. with just a count. The first performance measure for 2017 and 18, we have about 2,500 in 2017, almost 2,400 fieldwork events entered into SWIMS in 2018. But then I have numbers in parentheses that are much smaller, 561 and 446. That's when I was excluding the water action volunteers because I was a little less clear on whether the water action volunteers were actually monitoring for invasive species, but they have it integrated into their protocols that every time they go out, they're actually looking. But the way they enter their data, they're not saying that, yes, I did look for it. They're only entering data for when they do find something, so I'm a little uncertain of those numbers. For performance measure 2, again, as a reminder that monitoring for prohibited and restricted species, and so that's more of like the response monitoring. We had 65 fieldwork events in 2017 and 116 in 2018. So those are going to be when we find things like the round goby or water hyacinth, which happens a lot less frequency, but those are how many times we went out and looked. Performance measure 3, as a reminder, is looking at the long-term trend, and that's only including the data at this time for the NLA, National Lakes Assessment in 2017, and National Rivers and Stream Assessment in 2018. Performance number 5, that was the wetland monitoring, which is like a ton of fieldwork events, and that's because that's the roadside monitoring protocol, essentially, which is going to be a lot less time intensive, and we accomplished some pretty high numbers with that. And then on the right are just the findings. Rather than show you only 2017 and 2018, I showed you the long-term over 10 years, so from 2008 to 2018, and I have 3 different colored dots. What you see in blue is all new reports of invasive species. The red are the prohibited, so they're the ones we just don't see a lot, and you don't expect to see them a lot. And then the yellow are the restricted species, so things like the mystery snails, curly-leaf pondweed, and Eurasian water milfoil is included in those. And this is what you would expect to see and hope to see, that you don't see a lot of prohibited species across the landscape. And we know that those are our priority and remain such. I want to point out where you see like a really big spike in 2014 and 15, where you see like a high number of the all and the restricted. That's when we started doing a mass data upload of Phragmites records in Lake Michigan. And then we kind of stopped doing that just because we need to do a better job of assessing how it is we're entering the Phragmites records. But once we do, those numbers for 2016, 17, 18 will spike. The next slide. And then kind of moving forward, I just wanted to highlight the efforts that we're making, because it's a lot of work to pull all this stuff off. We've formed tech teams, an AIS monitoring tech team with all the regional DNR AIS coordinators. And then within that regional, the statewide AIS monitoring tech team, we have sub-teams. And I kind of list out who's doing what based on the performance measure. So for performance measure 1, we've got a team that I asked them to prioritize and sent out a survey saying there's a lot of issues going on. What needs to happen in 2019? Based on their survey results and a couple meetings that we had, this is what teams they wanted to form to get the work done to be rolling for 2019. So I've got the list of who's serving on which team, and in bold I have who volunteered to be the team leader for that. So for SWIMS issues, we have Jeannie Shearer and then a slew of regional staff. For looking at pathways, there's 7 pathways of entry into the state of Wisconsin. Matt Walrath, who's at LTE and NHC, Natural Heritage Conservation, he's leading that team. And then there's several different teams for response monitoring. How am I doing on time? Good? You're done. Done? Okay, so I'm not going to go on much longer, but you guys can see the slides. Thanks.
Yeah, nice job.
Yeah.
Okay. This is, okay, great. Thank you, Kyle. Let's hear about maintaining, expanding, and improving AIS.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be talking about responding to AIS populations. I guess one thing I wanted to note is I guess we'll have a range of low profile to high profile populations. So it We do go through the communication protocol and response framework, but not the majority of these are not high-profile findings. Marine had a nice slide showing the history over time. In 2017, there was roughly 326 populations, which consisted of 27 species, and 8 of these received EDR grants in 2017, and the majority of these were for Eurasian water milfoil, and then we had one for New Zealand mud snail and starry stonewort. Also in 2017, there was 3 higher profile response efforts. This was for Asian clam on Little Muskego Lake, flowering rush at Manawa Mill Pond, and yellow floating heart at a private pond. Next slide. In 2018, we saw roughly the same numbers. We had 309 populations, a few less species at 23. Also a few more grants in 2018 for EDR grants at 13. Still the majority of these were Eurasian water milfoil, and the rest was 1 or 2 grants for hybrid water milfoil, faucet snail, non-native Phragmites, starry stonewort, and zebra mussels. In 2018, there was also several higher profile response efforts. This is also for Asian clam in Lac La Belle, New Zealand mud snail on 2 creeks in Dane County, 2 populations of non-native Phragmites in St. Croix and Clark counties, 3 different water hyacinth efforts on the Mississippi near La Crosse, or in La Crosse County too, and then also zebra mussels at Middle McKenzie and Washburn County. Next slide, Allie. I kind of wanted to plot this. So this was just the species that received EDR grants in 2017 and 2018. So you can see that as, I guess, the more often species are reported, it seems like they're receiving less EDR grants. So as you move right on the graph, you can see that for the majority of species that only had a couple of reports, they were maybe more likely to receive EDR grants. And then I guess the one thing I wanted to point out was Eurasian water milfoil, where it seemed like those populations are maybe kind of outside of that trend and receiving a few more EDR grants. And yeah, next slide, Allie. And then the last thing I wanted to touch base on, some of the previous, I guess before I got here, there were some teams that were developing some risk assessment frameworks, and Tara is leading this out of the DISC team. So I talked to her, so we'd like to see if we can get this picked up and going again. So I think we'll have that started. And then Chelsea Blanke was also working on a urgency guide, which would be somewhat similar to what the DISC team was using. So I wanted to share that with the staff and keep working on that. And with that, I think that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, still on AIS control. Now we're talking about some wetland species, Brock.
Okay, I took a cue from Tim on these slides. We'll get everything in 2 slides.
2 slides.
Although Zach's got 3 specifically on Phragmites right after.
I was burning, Brock.
So we were supposed to maintain the existing network of purple loosestrife. Well, let me backtrack. So all the work that we've been doing has been the result of great staff, especially great LTEs, regional staff, super volunteers around the state, hundreds of willing landowners, and certainly much appreciated GLRI funding. Without all of those resources, none of this would be getting done, except the loosestrife, which predated a lot of this. So I wanted to get that out there. So we have maintained the network of purple loosestrife cooperators. We were supposed to conduct, and really what we've done is support workshops with lots of cooperators, and over the biennium we've released well over another 1 million goals at many, many sites around the state. Most of that has been orchestrated out of Madison, and we've had very centralized reporting here as well. Recruiting too, although a lot of that recruiting has come through workshops done by regional staff. So for 2019, we're looking at finishing work staff to digitize all the hard copy records for the Strife, getting it into SWIMS. Especially interesting is that we're looking at decentralizing a lot of the support for the program. And that means that regional programs and cooperators need to develop local control of their projects, including setting up secretary sites, getting a lot of their own equipment, et cetera. That's got to be worked out yet, but that's really the aim. Performance measure 3 and 4 with non-native Phragmites, we were supposed to understand the statewide distribution of Phragmites. We've done that with the archive, maintain a statewide partner working group. We've had a statewide meeting in 17 and 2 regional meetings in 18. Those have been done. We plan to continue those, assuming we have continued funding for all this. And we're supposed to implement a Phragmites control project, which we've obviously done, and encourage partner control in the rest of the state. Zach may give you some details on this. LIFWIC and DOT have been our primary major partners, along with hundreds of private landowners. In 2019, we're especially trying to recruit counties and SISMAs, getting much, much more involved, especially because 2019 will be our last year of contracted Phragmites control out of the central office. So Zach's got slides that tell you more details about what's actually been accomplished. Performance measure 5 was to map and strategize control for Glyceria maxima or tall mattograss in the Great Lakes Basin and continue priority control. So we used the archive and field work to show that the 9 southeastern Wisconsin counties still form the invasion epicenter, but we do have northern outliers. We did contract with AES, Applied Ecological Services, for an aerial survey of Calumet and select Jefferson County areas to test the efficacy of that process. We also contracted with CWISC to get out and confirm Glyceria maxima sites throughout most of the 9 counties in southeastern Wisconsin. We did survey and treat all the reported outlier populations in both years. The only ones that we actually confirmed were in Calumet and Winnebago counties, and those have been treated. Unfortunately, for 2019, because we're pretty sure that Glyceria remains in Calumet, I think the Winnebago site has been eliminated, but in Calumet, it's still there, and a realistic view is that it's not going away. So what we decided to do is work to develop a maintainable barrier between those populations and the lower watersheds, unfortunately, of which there are 3. From those sites, we can get distribution into Lake Winnebago, into the lower Fox, and into Lake Michigan. So it's a very problematic area. Next slide. Performance measure 6, kind of a long one, develop an integrated WIP control plan for the state that identifies extent and location of populations, documents control efforts, establishes statewide regional priority species, set or begin control efforts, especially with partners. First objective, training workshops to help people understand that wetland invasives are out there, become aware of them, how to identify them, and so on, to really help us be able to build what we know about where these things are. Objective 2, we developed a lot of education materials for the various species, coordinating their delivery, etc. Some of those items include creating or updating things such as the Purple Loosestrife brochure. We created a new Phragmites brochure. We updated the wetland ID sheet. We edited and updated the Japanese knotweed brochure, etc. All these things designed to help people understand better what they're up against. We didn't really work with the media that much. Most of our contacts have been with landowners in dealing with control of these things on their properties. Objective 3 was to update the archive. That goes back to establishing extent and location of the populations. That's a continuing effort. We also did a lot of road survey work, especially for Phragmites. to try to understand better where those populations are that had not been reported to us. Did experiment a little bit with a priority area management model specifically for Phragmites and a few Glyceria sites. But that's an effort that could be implemented with more resources, not something that we really pursued. So, go back.
Your time.
We have other species involved, so we prioritized working with giant hogweed, hairy woolwort, and lesser celandine in the Lake Michigan Basin. That plan was based on GLRI money. We'll continue that in 2019, hopefully expand to include some more work on mitigation on Japanese.
Thank you. So we'll hear a little bit more about Phragmites. Zach.
Yep. So Brock mentioned that we had determining the distribution and density of Phragmites throughout Wisconsin when he was given a little brief update there. So these are maps that my predecessor, Jason Granberg, put together that exemplifies distribution from early 2018. So this has not been updated with current monitoring data that we collected over the field season in 2018. So this is early 2018 data. Takeaways from this is that density is a lot higher in eastern counties bordering Lake Michigan, where Phragmites first came in. First really started showing up in the 80s and moving further west. And then also up in the Lake Superior Basin is another density hotspot. So with our GLRI funding and control projects, we've primarily been working in the Great Lakes Basin, more specifically in the Lake Michigan Basin. Next slide. And I'll update that shortly. So we have been working on Phragmites control in the Lake Michigan Basin since 2014 with GLRI funding, both with EPA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service money. It's primarily been U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Recently, we got an EPA GLRI control grant, so starting in 2018. So key takeaways from this is that the acreages and sites sprayed are cumulative. So what's shown there is not the total acreage sprayed in a given year because we did a lot of respraying and retreatment. And you can see that our acres controlled are increasing, and so are the number of sites considered controlled. So control in this case is there is no sign of regrowth in these areas. Now, that's not to say that there will not be resprouting. This is an iterative process, so we'll have to go back and resample these locations. Likely again in 2019 is the plan, and we'll go from there as funding becomes available. Next slide, please. So we had 2 LTEs. They monitored right around 3,700 populations of Phragmites in the Lake Michigan Basin. They found about 180 new populations that we considered eradicated, so no signs of regrowth in 2018. Those populations will be targeted again in 2019 for monitoring to assure that those populations are eliminated. So next point is I have roughly 2,500 new populations of Phragmites. So a slight aside on that is that a lot of that data comes from swims as lake centroids, but for control, we needed more specific location data. So we took those lake centroids and or wetland centroids, had LTEs go there and monitor them, and then split and or add new points for specific locations in that water body. So that's why that number might seem a little high. We also identified 193 new populations of native Phragmites. So this is really important, especially when sharing with partners that are going to attempt control efforts once we're done with our control efforts in 2019. So I'll be sharing native populations as well as non-native populations so they can compare and contrast, so they're not treating native populations. We also had some monitoring that we partnered with, I think UW Green Bay in Sheboygan County, and they found 800 new populations that I added to the archive. So that's just Sheboygan County, and that's primarily roadside surveys. They also survey for Japanese knotweed and teasel. So we'll be hopefully updating that information in SWIMS shortly. 2019 plans, we're going to retreat our sites, our new sites that we treated in 2018, and then retreat sites that have been treated at some point from 2018 or from 2014 to 2018 as we can get to them. And we'll prioritize those sites kind of on the western edge of our work area. So the low density sites kind of on the border prohibited counties for the species. So we're also working with Lake Michigan Basin County Partners and Wisconsin DOT to start mowing Phragmites in right-of-ways to improve control and treatment success in 2019. So we've been to quite a few local conservation area association meetings now, just doing some outreach on Phragmites control efforts in the region and trying to get partners engaged in mowing those sites to assist with control in the future. And other plans are we're just going to continue with our monitoring and control efforts in 2019.
Great, thank you, Greg. All right, AIS Goal 3.
All right. So I think this is kind of wrapping up some of the AIS control goals here. So the two that I'm going to touch base on is to conduct research and evaluation of AIS management strategies, and then kind of focusing specifically on these prohibited and high-profile species. We're also looking to evaluate new and integrated management techniques for control of AIS. And then also looking to track unmanaged populations over time. In addition, we've done a lot of really great research on Eurasian water milfoil, and we're at a point now where we have the ability to develop a kind of more of a statewide response plan for EWM. Using good science, building models, using the data we've collected to help kind of move our program forward in dealing with this species in the next biennium. Go ahead. So a little bit more detail on some of the prohibited and high-profile ones. Obviously, we've done a lot with starry stonewort in this last biennium. It's kind of the new invasive that we're dealing with. Looking a lot at both large and small-scale herbicide treatments, trying a variety of different products and combinations of those products. We're also looking at a variety of non-chemical integrated techniques, dash and drawdown, barriers, dredging. This isn't something that Wisconsin is just working on. We're part of several collaboratives working with other Midwest states and people across the U.S. So continuing to try to get ahead of this species as we continue to detect it out on the landscape. We've continued a lot of our work on Eurasian hybrid water milfoil, again looking at both large and small scale herbicide treatments. We've wrapped up a lot of really great research on 2,4-D, but there's new products out there that we're now starting to learn more about. Also, again, integrated non-chemical techniques, things like dash and weevils and other integrated managements. Thankfully, we haven't had a lot to deal with NR40 prohibited species, but we do have a couple populations of things like yellow floating heart. We have our water hyacinth that keeps recurring, and then some new non-native cattail species. So as we detect these, making sure we're understanding our evaluation techniques for them. Go ahead. So again, this is kind of just what I talked about, a little bit more detail again. So we have new herbicides out there. I'm sure you guys have heard of some of these. You're starting to maybe see them on permits. We're trying to learn as we do our operational management. So these are all herbicides that can be utilized, but we do want to try to learn from them as we do permit them. And then again, focusing more on IPM, I think that's going to be a direction we really move forward in the next biennium. I'm looking at these other techniques for various species. Go ahead. And then these unmanaged populations, I'm sure you guys have seen some of this information before. You know, to the best of our ability, we're going to try to keep these projects going. We're learning a lot from tracking these unmanaged Eurasian lakes, as well as some of our new starry stoneware lakes over time. So that'll be something that we'll continue to work forward on in the future. Go ahead. And then the response plan, again, you know, we have a slew of awesome data now out there. We've developed a aquatic plant statewide database. We now have a aquatic plant management statewide database that's basically operational. And so now we can really start putting some of these pieces together and looking at the state and how we're managing milfoil across a broader scale. Use this to help develop, you know, our future policy, grant review processes. Lots of work to be done here in the future.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that wraps up our report out, our retrospective on managing aquatic invasive species. Thanks, everybody. Mostly staying on time. So we'll shift now to our second program area, that's administering an aquatic plant management program. Goal number 1 is to improve APM permitting and control, maintaining effective integrated pest management program. Yep, that's about it. All right, Carol, let's talk about permitting.
This is one of our division reporting requirements. They wanted to track this one and want to make sure we're getting our permits out on time and that we're increasing our consistency in decision making. And of course, the permitting, you can see that last year we did very good in getting our permits out within the 10 to 15 day working window. 1,850 permits is probably the most we've ever done. It keeps increasing. We've gone to more of a calendar year now reporting. Some of our past reporting was split through the fiscal year, so I think we'll have better numbers. One of the things we'll get out of our better databases that we'll talk about is just better information, what we're doing. Surprisingly, when we reorganized or realigned the Bureau, we eliminated one district and went to 4 field districts, and somehow about 75% of the workload ends up in the Eastern District. So we're working on kind of rebalancing that. You can see that though 60% of our chemical permit business is private ponds, and that's something we're going to continue to focus on to try and streamline and work better, really work more on separate ponds from lake and river ecosystem management a little bit in the future. We also rechartered the APM team to try and bring about that consistency issue. I think that's been a good step. Getting everybody re-engaged in APM, getting a whole new crop of supervisors up to speed on what APM means. We've put out some guidance in the past couple of years, but that's kind of been on hiatus. But we did outline a handbook, took on some of the easier topics like notification, rote known, and die issues. Some of the big stuff, it would be more like manual code for implementing the program. We're going to want to hold off on that a little bit until we go through our administrative policy change, which we're hoping to do in the next year. And again, all permits and chemical records can be submitted online. We still have some convenience issues, particularly again with ponds, that prevent us from going to all electronic permitting, but we'll get there in the next couple of years. As far as treatment records go, that's a major success. You can now query treatment records back to 1995. They're probably not that good past 2011 when we implemented the Access database, but that's been a really long time coming, being able to go back and look at the treatment history on a body of water and start to understand that. So that's all in swims, and we'll start working on making that more available to folks. But again, I think accuracy and ability to track what we're doing, we can manage better if we have our information. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Carol. Back to Michelle.
All right, 2 topics here. So we have the aquatic plant management strategic analysis, and then our APM program consistency. Go ahead, Allie. So the strategic analysis, this was a really big effort that we're getting close to wrapping up here. So this is a pretty lengthy, comprehensive document that attempts to summarize kind of the current state of the science and information on aquatic plant management in Wisconsin. So it talks about our permitting process. It talks about kind of workload, gets into the science behind aquatic plant management, a lot of the recent research that we've been developing here in the state and learning from others. So this is going to be hopefully an informational resource to kind of help us move forward as we talk about developing, future APM policy and moving our program forward. We did just conclude a public comment period that ended about a week or two ago. We got pretty good comments from the public, a lot of really good feedback. So we're going to work through those comments, hopefully make our draft better based upon those. We also have an APM study group. If you want to hit, go ahead, Allie, just for one. So we have a 9-member study group of external partners that we've been working with to help kind of move us through this process, provide some feedback as we finalize the strategic analysis and move towards eventual implementation. We're actually having a meeting Thursday, to meet with this group for the second time. So a lot of work moving forward on this as well. Next slide. And then Carol kind of touched base on this a little bit, our APM program consistency. We want to continue developing a training program for staff that deal with APM and AIS issues. So we are consistent as far as our permitting and our general knowledge of APM. So we have this APM handbook that was discussed. Also, as we work on these new chemicals and these new management techniques, developing things like susceptibility tables and other guidance documents, continuing to do a lot of plant identification workshops, maybe working towards an assurance program, again, to try to work towards a consistency internally and externally. We have a APM technical team that's, again, kind of tasked with looking at these statewide consistency issues and also working on a kind of a evaluation of our program right now with Dan Halso and a couple others. And that's what I got.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the last section of APM, Goal 1, Integrated Pest Management, and specifically the wild rice strategic analysis. Kevin.
Can you hear me, Allie?
I can.
Perfect. All right, so that was good. This was right after the APM. So the wild rice, all department strategic analysis are kind of laid out the same. So this will be very similar to what Michelle just led you through. In the case of the wild rice, this is a strategic analysis that we started in the last biennium, and you'll see as I talk, it will continue into the next 2-year work planning cycle and hopefully transition actually into a wild rice statewide management plan. The project managers of this particular strategic analysis are Shelley Elness, our tribal liaison, and James Yock, our Northern District Secretary's Director. John Simonson is our lead, and Jason Fleener, my co-chair of our statewide wild rice advisory committee, and me keep that part of wild rice team in tune to the progress of this. I'll just, very similar to the APM, the wild rice strategic analysis is laying the foundation for a statewide wild rice management plan by fully assessing the latest scientific, natural resource, cultural, and socioeconomic information relating to the management of wild rice. This particular effort has formed a strategic analysis writing team. We did do an initial public scoping and tribal scoping. After that scoping effort, we have basically laid the foundation for the strategic analysis in chapters, subchapters, sections, table of contents, and our writing team has been busy, particularly I'd say since late summer, fall is when we've actually done probably most of our writing. So John Simon's been working with different individuals and groups on our writing team and making sure that progress is being made. And he has let me know that he's shooting for an internal draft of this strategic analysis to share with our leadership by late winter, spring, and hopefully a broad public and tribal release maybe by summer. But I will tell you right now, my experience has been in the strategic analysis world. timelines are pretty loose. We set them, but we realize they generally take a little longer than everybody thinks. There you go. I'll make up for Brock and Tim.
I will say that the APM so far group gets a prize for making up a whopping 5 minutes. Good job, everyone. Next time I will bring treats. Okay, so moving on from APM program to surface water grants. That's our third program area. Our goal here is to strengthen partnerships for prevention and control of adverse environmental outcomes on surface waters through grant incentives, in a nutshell. So to give you a quick look at the number of grants that we've given out through the Surface Water Grant Program since 2010. Thanks to Alex Delboy for compiling this information. So you can kind of see the balance across the various sub-programs of our grant program. So that's kind of looking back, and sort of now and into the future, our focus currently is on drafting and finalizing the new administrative code, NR 193, that unites the various administrative codes that the program has historically been administered under into one set of consistent procedures and policies. As a program, while we're writing the code for the new program, we're also thinking a lot about program and project evaluation. So we've established a set of goals for the grant program, and we are looking towards developing standardized reporting formats so that we can better track the effort that we're expending and paying for through the program, and also the ecological and environmental outcomes that emerge. Then hand in hand with the new administrative code writing, there will be over the next year and a half, maybe a little bit longer, a major increase in guidance production for the new program. So part of rolling out a new program is we write the guidance documents that allow people to understand how to interact with it and how to seek funding and what kinds of projects we're interested in supporting. So we're starting a major increase in the guidance production for the new program. So as you can see, one of the main focus areas of my time with the program is not only keeping the grant machine running, which it is, yay, it's really kind of focusing on revising the code. So this is kind of a teaser of the table of contents for NR 193. We have 7 subchapters, general provisions, it's sort of that administration, policies, and procedural chapter under which all of the grant subprograms now fall. And then we've kind of divided up our major program areas, like as you see on the left-hand side of the slide. And the 4 primary goals of this effort are, again, to unite programs under a consistent set of administrative policies, to support management at the watershed scale. You'll notice like a de-emphasis in the division between lakes and rivers and watersheds. We also are taking this opportunity to update the program to current standards and techniques. So integrating NR 40 is one example there. And there are a lot of measures in general provisions chapter that allow us to enhance accountability. So that's the Surface Water Grant Program. And then within that, we've got some stuff on healthy lakes. Just wondering, is Pamela online?
Yes, I am here.
Thanks.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for the opportunity to share an update on Healthy Lakes. As most of you know, Healthy Lakes from 2015 to 2018 was essentially a pilot statewide initiative. We had our own work plan based on sort of statewide lean government goals, and we exceeded our goals. They were administrative, basically to streamline the application process for awarding grants for shoreline projects. And we also had a participation goal to, I think it was double participation in those 3 years, and we exceeded that too. The map shows where projects have occurred at a lake scale throughout the state. We spent about $500,000 over those 3 years. And we've been tracking the community match. It's almost 1-to-1 as far as Lakeshore property owners, investment, and the lake groups. So local communities have put in about $500,000 in volunteer labor, cash donations, other things like that, which is impressive. The geographic distribution we're also pleased with. And that's where we were. Where we're going, next slide please, or the progress we've made since we started back in 2015 is we just recently updated the Healthy Lakes plan to include rivers and shoreline properties. Over the coming years, we're gonna have to update the application and some of our promotional materials to reflect that. This kind of gets us closer to a watershed approach for some of the projects. Things like rain gardens and rock infiltration are good, even if the properties aren't riparian to lakes and rivers. We're also in the process of amending the statewide non-point source management plan to adopt the Healthy Lakes and Rivers plan. And depending on timing, we'll see if the amendment makes sense or if it makes more sense to work with Green and others just to integrate it directly into the statewide non-point source plan, which is being updated over the next biennium anyway. We also developed a communication plan to fine-tune our messaging and outreach. We try to be proactive with Healthy Lakes, but a lot of what we've done over the past few years is more reacting to opportunities as they come up. And we're really trying, as we move forward, to target certain events. We want to develop an ambassador network. Part of the success of Healthy Lakes has been sort of the peer-to-peer, neighbor-to-neighbor communication and project development. And we're hoping to more formally recognize ambassadors as we move forward and really highlight out on the landscape projects as they were occurring. So more signage, developing more prompts. So if a neighbor talks to somebody on their lake, they can send them a postcard or give them a call afterwards to see if they're interested in doing projects. And we're going to turn to existing Healthy Lakes participants to help us develop that ambassador network. The other big thing that's happened, and it's mostly behind the scenes, and it's most, if not all, environmental grants. She really improved the education, and Victoria, when she was working with us, developed guidance for getting reimbursement for these projects. So it seems to me that the application process is much easier now than it was a few years ago. The image on here is an example of our new sort of promotional approach. It's a little more sophisticated than it's been in the past. This is I think it's a 7.5 foot tall display for conferences and events. We used it at the Lake Home and Cabin Show a few weekends ago, and I think we probably had hundreds, if not a couple thousand people come through our booth. So that was rewarding. Next slide, please. So Healthy Lakes has been, and now Healthy Lakes and Rivers, sort of just one piece of an overall water resource protection puzzle. In the state right now, we don't have an established Healthy Waters program or management plan or a statewide protection strategy, essentially, and that is something we will be working towards over the next couple of years. Allie mentioned some of the surface water grant improvements, and they're sort of tied into this to make it easier to do protection activities. We want to pull together various DNR programs and monitoring and assessment tools that have been developed over the years and develop basically a statewide Healthy Waters plan. Right now, we are working towards a work group to do that, and that's up to the Water Resources Policy Management Team. We'll be talking about it, I think, on Thursday. So stay tuned for Healthy Waters. Eventually, we'll definitely be tapping into external partners too to develop this effort.
Great. Thanks, Pamela.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so moving on from surface water grants and healthy lakes, we will turn toward partnerships. We have 3 goals. Most of them deal with enhancing partnerships, collaboration, and communication to better protect and restore Wisconsin surface waters. We're focused on technical capacity, water stewardship, forming management organizations, and then partnerships goals also deal with the information and the data and the tools and resources that our program uses to keep humming along.
I'll just apologize. A lot of this came right out of our strategic plan that we did in 2010, so that's why it's so wordy, but I think it's right for some consolidation.
Yep, this is directly from our work plan. We will send out the PDF of this PowerPoint, so it's kind of like a little bit of a reporter record. You don't have to read all of it right now. So partnerships, goal number 1 is, I believe, Carol.
Yeah, this was kind of the internal one. We did, this was an alignment goal that came down. Actually, we kind of proposed it that as we split fish, wildlife, and parks off in different division, we wanted to make sure that there was still a connection with their habitat. So we did charter a aquatic habitat cross-program team. It's basically fisheries and water resources, and kind of got a meeting in, got kind of our roles established. Part of the issue was we both were going through a lot of organization changes, and it just wasn't really convenient to put a cross-program team together a lot. But we did get it, like I said, kind of chartered and organized. Fisheries identified their folks and hired Alex Latska in the position that will be the co-leader with me of this team. And then on our side, we'll have a district supervisor yet to be named, because we had 3 new district supervisors this year. And then Greg Searle is our Phil will be represented, and then the APM team leader, who is also vacant. So we'll get this team going again. I just want to quickly talk a bit about maybe what some of the issues the team's looking at. First one that came up was just habitat restoration, protection, things like fish sticks, aeration, stuff that happens in the lake that really we need to have some cross-program policies on. Critical habitat designations might be something that we want to pick back up as a work group. Things like Glacial Lakes Partnership would kind of help, this team would help along with. Just resolving some of these conflicts we have on waters. AIS, of course, is one where we need to respond to a rapid response in a water. Perhaps it's a fish. APM, we tend to cross over a lot with spearing and APM treatments. And even things like WPDS and habitat designations. And then even less so, things like non-game rare species management might come under this. I guess the other, some policy initiatives. We're working on the APM strategic analysis, surface water grants, monitoring strategy, AIS plan. Fish management has a policy initiatives on shoreland, littoral habitat protection, so that'll fit very nicely with Healthy Lakes. They also have chartered an in-lake, a shallow lakes team, which will also kind of be coordinated to here. Some of their interests are on in-lake habitat construction, like fish habitats, fish sticks. We need to work on their habitat interests. Our temperature and oxygen is critical fish habitat, so we'll trying to work that into some of our work as well as AIS. So now that Alex is on board and we get a little bit more of our change behind us, I think we'll get the team back together. And the plan is just to meet twice a year, kind of to revolve around work planning cycles. And this might be one of the reasons we didn't make a lot of progress. Pretty much in the last year, I've been involved in over a dozen hires. Really, it's been a great thing, but as you know, we've brought Allie on as the Lakes team leader. We brought Jake. Is Jake on at all? Is he sitting at his desk? Jake Dickman is the AIS swims IT leader, and then Lake and Reservoir ecologist Michelle Nault. We hired 4 AIS project positions. 3 of them are out in the field under the Gray Waters. The one early detection response position is new in our office, and that's Kyle Mosel. The pathway specialist, I'm just going to run down the names, is Jeremy Bates, Amy Kretlow were incumbents, and then Amanda Smith took Michelle's vacancy in Green Bay. And then we've had a new hire of LTEs for SWIMS and Geographic Names Council. That should be GNC. I don't know why. Oh, anyway, so we have Michaela Feigl there in grants. We've hired Alex Delvoy, Wetland Invasive Species, Zach Crone, and ES Research, actually McCord. So we have a new team in place, and should be a great opportunity now for a new work plan. So.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, on to goal number 2 with partnerships, inspiring and engaging people for wise waters.
Yeah, hopefully I'm coming across all right, audio-wise.
Well,
great.
Okay, so just in a nutshell, we do a lot of work through a contract with the DNR. So Aaron mentioned this way earlier in this call, that we have a contract that specifies out a set of deliverables that we carry out pretty much on an annual basis, though it's really set up in the biennial work plan framework. A big chunk of that is kind of what you see envisioned right here on this page. It's putting together the annual Lakes Partnership Convention. It's publishing Lake Tides and encouraging more people to subscribe to Lake Tides, our free quarterly newsletter that goes out to literally tens of thousands of people 4 times a year. It's maintaining our webpage. It's keeping new information on the webpage. It's making sure that we're meeting people's needs for information about lakes, and that covers a wide range of topics, everything from the economics of lakes to shoreland habitat to how to start and operate a lake organization is all available on our webpage. And then we also have the Lake Leaders program. You see a photograph of some of our graduates there at the Aldo Leopold Shack. So really we're doing what we can to foster the public awareness and knowledge and ability to participate in their role as stewards of the resources. And it's really predicated on that model that we developed back in the 70s, way before my time, which acknowledges that shoreline property owners have this really powerful interest in taking care of their lakes, and the state of Wisconsin is wise to leverage that interest to try to use their concern and their resources to the better of everyone in the state of Wisconsin, because those lakes are public property. I was talking to someone recently. I said, you know, the state parks would be very jealous if they had this level of involvement of landowners around state parks who really want to do everything they can to make that park a more healthy and useful resource. And these lakes in many ways are like state parks. They belong to everybody, and they're really these open access resources. So it's great that I feel like we've been pretty successful at leveraging this interest. Go ahead to the next slide. So one of the things we're really doing to kind of turn the page or to broaden this out is to make this transition from just thinking about creating new organizations around the state to some method by which we're actually measuring how effective these organizations are. And so we've been talking about, or I've been talking about lake capacity, lake organization capacity quite a bit. You see the triangle there, sort of the model that we've developed is sort of this 4 parts of capacity, so that we aren't just thinking of it as a simplistic thing, but really recognizing that every organization may have strengths in one of these 4 areas, but ultimately what we're hoping to get people good at is carrying out programs, which is really doing things to protect and restore the lakes. Another thing that we've been doing, this kind of relates back to some of the stuff we do for the Lakes Partnership, is partnering heavily on the Healthy Lakes Initiative. So it's not only helping to be the liaison to get this web page up and running, the Healthy Lakes web page, which you see a picture of there, but it's also thinking about how do we make sure that there's a health, how to put it, a business base out there of people who are service providers who can do the restoration work that we know is needed. So it's not enough just to motivate people to want to do restoration at their property. A lot of our audience isn't really, they may not be capable of or not interested in physically doing the labor. Okay, well then that just means maybe we hire people to do the restoration work. Who are those businesses? And Patrick Goggin has taken the lead in the last biennium of continuing to do specific trainings to shoreline restoration service providers. And that's something that we do see growing and continuing forward into the next biennium. And that's pretty much it for what I wanted to talk about.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so.
Ready, Allie?
Hey, Allie, you're muted.
Pressing Alt-A.
Okay, back, I think.
I hear you now.
Great.
All right, I'll start with a few numbers and then highlight some recent accomplishments and future plans for CLMN. We currently have about 1,700 active CLMN volunteers that participate in various aspects of the network. Between myself and the regional CLMN staff, we spend a lot of time recruiting, training, and supporting these volunteers. And the regional coordinators do an awesome job of providing local support to them. Since the network began in 1986, we've had 4,977 citizens associated with a CLMN fieldwork event in SWIMS. So it's a huge number of people that have participated. And we've had 11 volunteer individuals monitor for more than 30 years across this time. In 2017, we released the AIS Early Detector Handbook to serve as the main resource for our AIS monitoring volunteers. This was in response mostly to feedback from volunteers and staff that the old manual was too bulky and too much like a textbook. So we still have links to the old manual on our website, but the Early Detector Handbook is the only one that we print now. The cost savings of the new manual allowed us to provide one free AIS monitoring kit per lake at no charge, which includes a rake, a handbook, and a few other things. We used to charge for that kit. Another piece of feedback we've gotten from volunteers is that they have a hunger for lake knowledge of all kinds. So last year we held our first CLMN Lake Learning Day, which is a no-charge, bring your own lunch day of seminars and hands-on learning opportunities for them. So we focused on freshwater mussels, aquatic plants, and odonates this time, based on suggestions from volunteers about what they would like to learn more about. So they got to learn about each of these topics and spend some time outside in teams, doing sort of a competitive scavenger hunt to apply what they learned in the classroom. And this year we've had suggestions coming in already for loons, eagles, bats, frogs, and somebody wrote anything lake ecology, which is a good summary of what we hear a lot from our volunteers. They're interested in anything related to lakes. Some water chemistry lakes are now ending these 3-year terms that we started 3 years ago, obviously. This allows for more lakes to be assessed for the 305B and 303D reporting and keeps the waiting list for chemistry monitoring small. Ideally, we can get all the people on the waiting list, or all the lakes on the waiting list, into chemistry the next year, so we don't have people waiting on the list for multiple years. And after 3 years, the regional CLMN coordinator or lake biologist could still recommend that a lake continues to monitor chemistry for a longer period if they still see a need for more data. But we're trying to keep about half of these 500 plus chemistry lakes as long-term monitoring sites, with the other half being rotated through on 3-year terms. We also added boat landings on lakes to the statewide Snapshot Day, which is coordinated by Natalie at the River Alliance. Snapshot Day has been a very successful event over the year and supplies more AIS monitoring data than any other monitoring program in the state. We had over 170 participants last year, and the 2019 Snapshot Day will be on Saturday, August 17th. New effort this year we'll be launching the Aquatic Plant Taxonomic Assurance Program at the Summer Plant ID trainings. And I mentioned at the beginning of the call, it's June 11th and 12th in Green Lake and June 25th through 27th at Chem Station. The idea is to give DNR some assurance that a person conducting a PI survey is well qualified to do that survey. Allie and Michelle and Susan and I piloted a test last year at these trainings using photographs, but based on feedback we got from the participants, we're going to use live specimens for the actual test this year. Participants that pass the test will be added to a list, and it could be a future grant requirement that any PI survey paid for by DNR money would have to be done by somebody on the list. Next slide, please. Also related to quality assurance is the plan to create a QA/QC tutorial video for chemistry volunteers. We request that 10% of our volunteers in chemistry collect blank and duplicate samples in addition to their normal samples, and about half of them usually actually do it. The results of their additional sampling has been great, but we'd like to get closer to the target of 10%. So we think a video tutorial will help ease any confusion over the additional sampling procedures and hopefully get us better participation closer to that 10% that we're shooting for. We also plan to send out a volunteer survey later this year that will be similar to the one we sent out in the fall of 2014. That survey focused on the volunteer satisfaction with various aspects of CLMN and the importance of those aspects to them. They identified strengths and weaknesses of the program and provided recommendations for future directions of CLMN. So it'll be interesting to see the results of the follow-up survey. And lastly, I already mentioned the early detector handbook, but something in the works currently is to revise the handbook this fall to include some additional regulated species and some other monitoring protocols. And it'll basically become a one-stop shop for multiple programs and for staff, but we'll stay in a colorful and easy to read format. So right now I'm working with a team of DNR and extension staff to determine which additional AIS and which lookalike species should be added to the manual for the next revision. That's all I have.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, goal number 3. We're gonna shift our focus toward IT and GIS support. Jake, are you online?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Sweet. All right. Well, I do have some like other things popping in, Allie, so you might have to tab over. Yeah, so mainly we're talking about maintaining data systems, improving data quality and integrity. So every year we have annual IT contracts to maintain, enhance, and develop our IT tools and databases. This includes Row, SWIMS, the ELT mapping tool in our viewers as well, and our lakes pages. All these systems are interconnected in some way, so it's important for us to have these annual IT contracts to maintain these systems and fix things when needed. Next, please. And then annual tasks that we do to ensure data integrity and usability. Examples include lake data without sample depths. So this might be a mishap where sample depths weren't written down on the lab slip or not entered by the lab. Going through and QAing those data so that they can be included in the integrated report assessments every year. Data with no SWIM station. So if data are sent from the lab to SWIMS and they don't have a station or station was unclear or incorrectly written down, that gets stored in a certain area where we have to look through and make sure that it has the right information for us to be able to determine where the sample was collected. So this sometimes happens when lab slips aren't sent in with the samples. The lab will create a lab slip and then send it off into SWIMS. So we have to determine where that data was collected, and this helps us provide more data for assessments. Fieldwork events with multiple samples. Sometimes lab slips are used multiple times. That leads to confusion as to not being able to find samples that have been collected as part of a project. So we QA that every year. And then another thing on the side of Clean Boats, Clean Waters, assigning WBICs to where boaters have been data. So as volunteers or paid inspectors enter data into SWIMS on prior landings that boaters have been to, or prior lakes, we assign WBICs to each of those water bodies based off the information given, county as well as lake name. So we do our best to determine which lakes those are which WBICs, and then those get populated and pulled into our Where Voters Have Been tool. Yeah, next slide, please. And then, so a big component of my position is the SWIMS redesign with mobile applications. So we do have IT contracts. We have been for the last couple years to develop a new user interface and increase mobile friendliness. Next point. So that's our new interface. Most of you might have seen that at the summer partnership meeting. So next, please. So inherently is more mobile friendly. The old system is awesome. It's kind of set up right out of the gate to do certain things, but the new user interface or system that we're using to build the new interface has a lot of work on the back end to be able to set it up, but it allows us to do a lot more and more freely. And then it looks great on phones pretty much right out the bat. So it's pretty cool. New components and additions that we have in this new SWIMS, the APM module. So this was spearheaded by Dennis Weiss and Mikhail Feigl, Christina Famal, and a few others. As Michelle mentioned earlier, a lot of the APM or most of the APM data that we have are now in SWIMS. So it provides a lot of quicker management. In future, we'll have a lot of more search functionality for lakes with APM permits on them. We also have a bulk upload tool that we implemented and developed. So this allows us, so say Ashley Veronic gets a lot of data for the integrated report. We can format those data in a specific Excel spreadsheet, and then we can upload those directly into SWIMS, providing a lot more data for assessments. Next, please. So that's a picture of our kind of APM. So different areas for finding, browsing, and creating new permits within SWIMS. And so far, what I've heard, it's been great. Next, please. And then mobile applications. Ben Court and Dennis Weiss, as well as others, have been working on Survey 123 applications in SWIMS. So we've created 5 or 6 different forms that are still in development. But in theory, when you download a form, can you hit the next? I have a little image there. When you download the form, you enter in some information such as your WAMs or user ID, county, pick a lake, project, station information, and then you enter in the basic information that you would collect out on the lake, SECI depth. If you have a temp DO profile, you would enter that in as well. Once you hit save, that sends data directly into SWIMS. So it's just like writing down on a piece of paper and then entering it into the database. You enter it in on here, and then it gets sent directly to SWIMS. So we've tested that for a few things in some of our testing environments, and so far it's working great, and we hope to have some of these rolled out relatively soon. And then next. And the final slide. For the next biennium, finishing up the SWIMS redesign. I know it's been a long time coming. I think when I started in 2016, Jennifer Filbert, who was my predecessor, left shortly after, and then SWIMS redesign kind of went along, but it trickled along the way. So I started back in April of last year. So I'm getting my feet on these projects, but next year we definitely want to finish that off and make it as useful as possible, as well as enhance lakes and river pages. We've heard a lot about people wanting to find more data, more information on these lakes and water bodies, and we're looking into ways to provide that. So that's all I have.
Right, and we are on to the last set of performance measures under Goal 3, and for the whole talk, Dennis Weiss, are you online?
Yep. Essentially, Jake just covered a lot of stuff that we're working on. Essentially, all I did was just threw up kind of a list of the different IT projects that we've been working on for the last year or two. As you can see, as well as I can, the different projects listed, some GIS responsibilities that we have. Next slide. And then, yeah, we provide excellent customer services, or at least we try. There's a couple different ways of communication that we communicate with not only DNR staff, but external staff as well through the Lakes inbox, as well as communicating through email or phone calls or whatever with volunteer and staff. The one thing I don't have listed here, but it is the last bullet talks about a DNR hydrology data set. We are actually working with the wetlands folks to actually have a combined wetland hydro LIDAR based data set. And it's probably a few years out, but there is a plan to actually have a new DNR hydrography layer. So that's all I got.
Dennis?
Yeah.
So who's the model?
Somebody from our digital asset management system.
This looked like Katie, I thought at first, but
That's what I don't know. I just liked the, kind of an aside to how much work we do on a daily basis. Feels underwater sometimes. Oh, it was really lovely. Thank you, everybody, for giving us a rundown. It's pretty incredible sometimes to stand back, reflect on 2 years and what we have managed to accomplish. To me, it's great. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I'm impressed. It's great to see. Everybody should clap. But you work every day and you're not really sure what you're doing, and then you can sit back and look at all that we do get done.
Yeah.
As a segue into next year, let's think about what we did. Spend some time in the next few weeks thinking about what we want to do in the next 2 years and set another plan.
Yep, exactly. So we're going to have an in-person meeting in late February. I invited some folks, and there are more coming. So apologize for the last minute notice, but you may hear from me shortly. The goal, over the next few weeks, the rest of this month, is to write a work plan for that is wrong. I guess it would be starting in 2019 and going to 22. Yeah, so almost right. We will review the output, the result of that work in March. So we'll have, one probably half an hour or maybe a little bit longer, depending on how concise we can be, presentation reviewing our plans for the future. So you might be wondering, I've heard a lot of information, I had a lot of thoughts, I had a lot of feelings about the stuff that you guys were talking about. Well, you can contribute by responding to a feedback survey. We're going to use the information that you provide in this survey to decide, which measures we might consider sunsetting. So, what can we remove from the work plan? Either it's a low priority, or in your opinion, or maybe we've completed it and we don't need to devote more time to it in the future. You can pick things that you want us to maintain. What should we continue to work on? And then there's an opportunity to offer new ideas, things that are sun rising in our program. What emerging work areas should we include for the next 2 years? And from your perspective, if you kind of take a step back and look at our program areas, our goals, and our individual performance measures, what are your top priorities, or what should be our top priorities? I'm going to throw this link up again, because all of this stuff now should be fresh in your mind. If you'd like to log on, or just enter that link into your browser right now, you can go ahead and start providing feedback on the information that we just presented. I will send out a PDF of this PowerPoint, our current work plan, so from 17 to 19, sorry, man, numbers, and the meeting minutes that Alex has been typing up. We'll get that out ASAP. So if you want to wait for the information to help you guide your feedback, I'll send it out imminently, but please feel free to get started right now in the last few minutes. We are just about at time.
It'll take them how long to complete?
Oh, it depends. So thank you. There's an option at the very beginning of the survey to select which program area you'd like to provide feedback on. So say you are an AIS person and you don't have any other opinions about any of the other work that we do, you can check the box for AIS program area, and then you will only see the feedback options for that program area. So if you check one box, it could be 5 to 10 minutes. If you want to provide feedback on all 4 areas and give general comments, SurveyMonkey estimates that it'll take about 20 to 25 minutes. I know that's a lot of time, but you can kind of.
For 2 years' work.
Absolutely. I promise you we will use the information. We're going to have some brainstorming breakout sessions in person. And, one of the first things that we're going to do is review this feedback and send a packet of information with the breakout groups so they can refer to it as well. So stick with it. Thank you in advance for your time.
In addition to sending out the PowerPoints, we have been recording this presentation, so we're going to upload the recording and share the link of that. So if you know of people who weren't on this call or who weren't participating in this meeting that really have had maybe issues or concerns, or maybe they're just our biggest fans, you can share this with them. They can watch it. They can click on the links then too and give some feedback as well. So we're really hoping that the participants in this meeting today can help disseminate this information out to additional stakeholders as well.
Yeah.
Can it be automatically sent out to anybody who's been applying for grants this year?
Could do that.
You might want to repeat your question.
Well, your question is external people. I don't know how well they'd be able to comment. I mean, we really want to get internal staff comments, especially.
Professional partners.
Hopefully you're filtering what you might hear from your public as well. In the last 5 minutes, just questions, comments,
anything big?
Concerns. How many people stuck with the whole thing?
How many people did? 46.
All right.
I'm still here. The Zoom thing is really cool, actually. I like it. Just talking about organisms in trade, I think that's a big thing I want to mention to people to consider about when they're thinking about their work plans and working together to build partnerships and empower our regional coordinators to get out into the shops and do education.
New pathway.
Yeah. With that, central office, it sounds like there's a taco bar emerging. Taco bar.
Someone asked what the deadline is for the SurveyMonkey, the feedback tool. We're really looking at like next Monday as a deadline, and I know that's a short turnaround, but we really also want this to be something you do because this is all fresh in your mind. And we also need that to be done by that point so that we can actually do a little bit of digesting of what you respond and then use it later that week. So it's coming up pretty quick.
That's true.
Room right at noon.
Turn around.
Right.
So yeah, that's it, everybody. This is what it looks like. Go to the link, start the survey here, Monday, February 11th. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.